Welcome to Still Plays Galaxy, viewers. We are back with a talk video, and with this one, we are trying something a little bit different. We're doing the Conquest character kit reveal analysis closer to the character's actual arrival in game rather than at the time of the kit announcement. So let me know in the comments if you think this is more helpful. For one, it buys me more time and flexibility, but also to help us, and more importantly me, remember all the nuances of these kits. Because typically with these Conquest characters, by the time we actually get to use them in game, I've forgotten the kits completely, so hopefully this rectifies that. Fortunately, with Dark Trooper Moff Gideon, CG has allowed us to experience a little bit of play with Conquest consumables, so we will have a little bit of footage here that at least gives us a clue to his viability, but that gameplay is outside of the game modes where he is designed to shine and is affected by all the modifiers, so it's not a pure distillation of how we should be interpreting his performance, plus the gear levels and everything. But we will be breaking down the kit, the insights, and the gear, one of the benefits of doing this a little bit later. Dark Trooper Moff Gideon joins the game as a Tank Empire Imperial Remnant leader. From the attributes portion, CG lists out that he will be lifting the Imperial Remnant squad into relevance, which is a little harsh because it was a solid squad. It just couldn't outperform Veers, so it got overlooked. He will in addition scale basic damage based on target debuffs. In Territory Wars, starts with Taunt, which forces insight generation, punishes enemy turn meter gains, and helps allies prosper when turn meter is manipulated positively or negatively. Challenges certain GLs in Territory Wars and will be strong against MJ and Juhani armies. Without even reading more, what this might mean is that keeping JMK for offense might be more important if he does turn out to be strong on defense, since JMK will shut down these mechanics. Inspiration, we're skipping over the inspiration, but not because we always do, or not just because we always do, but because I hated this development in the show. I thought it was lazy and uninteresting, and I did not care to see him added to the game, but that doesn't mean I'm going to ignore him, because I've learned from my mistakes. A long time ago, I tried to ignore the Phoenix because I didn't have any relationship with Rebels, and I learned to regret it when Grand Admiral Thrawn was added to the game, a character I did care about. So I just deal with these things at this point. With the strategy tips portion, CG as always gives us indicators to how to utilize the kit. I wish they didn't do this. I wish we had to just muddle through and figure it out, because I think that could be more interesting, but they give us these clues. Time the first special, time the revive, as in don't just use these abilities when they become available off a cooldown. Think about when to use them to get the best use out of the kit and from the squad. He works effectively with Imperial Super Commando, who had that touch-up that also boosted Gar Saxon and made a dark side Mandalorian squad viable, and he is not going to work too well with droid allies, which means CG intends Dark Trooper to remain on the Veer squad. And now we get to do our breakdown of the kit and do some analysis, and this time we actually get to splice in a little bit of footage from Conquest, since CG allowed us to take him for a little bit of a test spin. The basic ability, Force Lance. Physical damage to the target, gain 1 stack of insight, a max of 4, and if the target had daze, offense down, or stagger, then inflict stun. The attack will also do 10% more damage for each debuff on the target. So to maximize this basic ability, target whoever has the most debuffs and one of the triggers. This is a very powerful basic, and I definitely like how there's a variety of debuffs that can land the stun or that trigger the stun. So it will be more prevalent in a match. And you can already see some really strong scout synergies, since because a lot of the debuffs that Scout Trooper inflicts are going to cause the stun. The first special ability, Strategic Onslaught. This is an Omicron ability with a cooldown of 3. AoE physical damage and remove 10% turn meter for each stack of insight on Moff Gideon, which can't be evaded. Moff Gideon will then lose all stacks of insight. So we start seeing some Moff Gideon mechanics here, almost like a hybrid of Moff Gideon and Dark Trooper. Short cooldown, turn meter removal, plus damage, but definitely be choosy with it. Don't just use it if they're low on turn meter, and and wait for the stacks of insight. So this is where we're seeing that we want to time these abilities. The Omicron portion, Territory Wars Ami, deal additional true damage and remove an additional 10% turn meter for each stack of insight on Dark Trooper Moff Gideon. AoE inflict healing immunity, can't be resisted or dispelled. Very powerful ability in TW. That's potentially an 80% turn meter removal plus a locked healing immunity combined with a fairly quick cooldown. Yeah, I can start seeing how powerful he could potentially be in Territory Wars. This is definitely an Omicron that you're going to be wanting to put on if you're investing in that portion of the game. The second special ability, Unwavering Presence. This is a Zeta ability with a cooldown of 4. Grant all allies accuracy and defense up. DTMG taunts, which can't be prevented. Recover 30% health and protection and call the target ally to assist. Now, an unpreventable taunt combined with an AoE heal is pretty huge. That's going to add a lot of survivability to the squad. It's going to focus the attacks onto the tank, and it's going to heal up everybody else. There's also a lot else going on here. There's no insight mechanic. That's a little notable. There's a large possibility that this should be the first turn move for Moff Gideon. We're going to want to get that taunt up, and I think this because if we look at the unique Omicron, that grants taunt to begin a battle. Now, if that is something that is Omicron worthy, that must mean it's pretty important to have taunt early on. So take a serious look at that. We'll be able to see some of that within some of the footage. I also think there's room to explore which ally to call for the assist. I think with Mandalorians it's a little bit easier. You call Maul so he can get his stacks of anguish up a little bit faster. If we are not using the Mandalorians, then I think we can explore with the troopers some options, although I think Scout Trooper's probably a good candidate, particularly because a lot of us are going to just have them at high relics because of GL Leia. The unique ability, Dark Trooper Beskar Armor. This is a Zeta and Omicron ability. Dark Trooper Moff Gideon has plus 100% crit avoidance, plus 50 defense, and plus 30% max health and max protection. At the end of his turn, DT Moff Gideon recovers 30% protection, and if DT Moff Gideon has 4 or more stacks of insight, whenever he would be defeated, he recovers 100% health, loses all stacks of insight, and the weakest non-GL ally is defeated. Now, if the allied leader is a Darkside Mandalorian, DT Moff Gideon gains 25% offense, and Darkside Mandalorian allies recover 20% protection at the end of their turn. Now, this portion is critical because it replaces the protection recovery that Bo-Katan gave to the Mandalorian squad. And since Imperial Super Commando also has 10% protection recovery on attacks out of turn, their combined effect is going to be pretty helpful in making that squad much more survivable, in addition to the tanking that Moff Gideon is going to be doing. With the Omicron portion, again a Territory War Omicron, Dark Trooper Moff Gideon gains an additional 30% max protection and recovers 100% protection on his first turn, and he begins the battle with taunt and 4 stacks of insight. Whenever he receives damage, he gains a stack of insight, maxing out at 4. Now, because it says insight max out at 4, it also says, though, with the revive mechanic, if Moff Gideon has 4 stacks or more of insight. So why is it saying in some locations that he can have a max of 4, and one location he's saying 4 or more stacks? I know there's a discrepancy there. It probably doesn't matter. Maybe just an editing issue. But one thing about that Omicron, and I think it's a fairly good Omicron, is it basically guarantees that he's always going to have those max stacks of insight, because if while he's being attacked, he's going to very quickly get back to 4. And 4 is not a lot to get. The leader ability is Shadow Contingency, and it is a Zeta ability. Man, we need a lot of Zetas these days. Non-droid Imperial Remnant allies have plus 75% crit chance, crit damage, defense, and offense. If all allies were Remnant at the start of the battle, whenever an ally gains or loses bonus turn meter, or a bonus turn, they recover that much health and protection. Whenever an enemy gains bonus turn meter or a bonus turn, they lose 10% defense, offense, and turn meter until the end of their turn. So here we see the impacts of the turn meter mechanics and why JMK will be a strong counter to this squad. Ally turn meter manipulation adds to survivability, and enemy turn meter removal results in stat loss. And since Jedi Master Kenobi shuts down turn meter manipulation, he shuts down this portion of the leadership, which negates a lot of the benefits that the squad would be having. Now, with the rest of this, whenever Dark Trooper Moff Gideon uses a special, all allies gain 10% offense and defense stacking. That's very nice. It's an argument to actually use a lot of those special abilities very quickly. Otherwise, we're not going to get a ton of offense and defense stacking. Whenever Dark Trooper Moff Gideon begins his turn, all allied Moff Gideons gain 1 stack of insight until the end of the counter. This is going to help the insight mechanics, and he should have no trouble getting those max stacks, although to use him as an Imperial Remnant leader, that's really just going to be within the Territory Wars mechanic. And if you're going to be using him in Territory Wars like this, probably you should use the Omicron, at which point this isn't really a big deal, because just being attacked is going to be creating those max insight stacks. So having an additional insight gain, there's diminishing returns there. Now with the Omicron, again, Territory Wars, non-droid Imperial Remnant allies have plus 75% health and mastery and plus 30 speed. Whenever an Imperial Remnant ally is revived, grant them a bonus turn, and that ability is probably the last Omicron I would put on if I were to do these. The special and the unique, I think, are much more important than this leadership one, which is atypical. Usually the leader ones are fairly safe to put on. And with insight is that standard thing about gaining bonus effects based on number of stacks. And now for our gear breakdown of Dark Trooper Moff Gideon. Gear level 7 is where we like to start because I like to pay attention to the Mark III holo projector. We need a lot of these. Sometimes gear level 7 you'll need a bunch of them. I like to be cognizant of it just because it's important for rhodium heatsink conversion. So this is good. That is way less than it could have been. At gear level 8 we have 2 pieces that are notable: a stun gun and a Chirotech set. That so far is not atypical. Gear level 9, we get an additional stun gun and another Chirotech set. This is one of those like soft choke points where very often lately we've been seeing 2 sets of Chiros at gear 9. So to only see 1 is good news. An extra stun gun's not a big deal. And then we have these fusion furnaces. If you're in the early game, that can be a pain, but it's a piece you grow out of. Like, I no longer even think about them. You can completely finish them. At gear 10, this is some good news. No Chirotechs here. There's 1 additional stun gun, and there is this Mark 8 Neurosav that I like to pay attention to because it is part of the gear 12 to relic jump, and so you can burn through those. But to get to gear 11, that's only 2 sets of Chiros, which is definitely below average because usually we're seeing 3 sets of Chiros to gear 11. Now at gear 11 to gear 12, we see 1 additional set, so we kind of average out to the same amount total, but it's a little bit more spread out and shifted to the end, which allows us to get to a point where we can actually test Moff Gideon at a gear 11 level and still be a little conservative with our Chirotech usage. There's also another stun gun here, so we're looking at a stun gun per level. Actually, there's 2 stun guns at this level when we look at the Mark 6 stun gun here. But there is no back to gel, or no, there is 1 Mark 4 back to gel. This is fairly average gear 11 to 12. And at gear 12, we have 1 fusion furnace. We do have the Chiro Prod as the finishing piece, which is the more in-demand one, so that's a little bit more in demand, but overall, this is not that bad. There are a bunch of med packs. I've got 3 sets of med packs, and that is a high demand piece, but I would say slightly below average overall, which after a character like Jedi Knight Cal Kestis, or if you got Leia recently like I did, having a character like this to kind of transition into other focuses like Mandalore Bow, that is a pretty nice benefit. We're going to wrap it up there. The Keller and Beck kit may or may not have come out by the time we post this, so we'll see. Keep an eye out on that if that does happen to be the case. Otherwise, I have a roster update video where we get into some other topics that are worth addressing and that are a little interesting. And anyway, thank you for watching. Be excellent to each other, everybody. This still plays Galaxy of Heroes.